Okay, Cole, it's good to have you back. Jared was in your place. Thank you, Jared, for what you did last week. But my main man, Cole is back. Cole was around the world. I seen him on Instagram. So, Cole, how was the birthday and how was it out there?
Yeah, it was actually pretty amazing. You know, other than this hurricane that came through, it stopped me from coming home Sunday, Monday. So I came home I got home at 1 a.m. yesterday. So all in all, it was pretty solid.
That's good. You know, the hurricane was interesting because they made a big deal out of it. I went and sandbagged at my parents' house in some place, and nothing happened. But I guess it's better. Well, I shouldn't say nothing happened because there were some areas that were hit bad, but at least in our area, it was okay. As you guys can see, I'm going to have a guest today. We're going to get this show started as usual, a little introduction music. Yes, over the week, me and my buddy Isaac recording at the OC recording studio. A little our own music so I don't get no YouTube hits with the copyright. So this is Never Satisfied, featuring yours truly and my buddy Isaac Reese. Special guest in the house today. Instead of Terry Lamar, I'm Terry Lamar Winfrey when I got the guest. My man Cole back. Everybody's in the building. Murph, a.k.a. Charlie Townsend's in here. I'm excited. We're going to talk a little sports today. All right, and here we have it. It's your host, Terry Lamar, episode 6, Cole Tells Me of the Never About the Cake podcast. And I have a special guest. I really, really appreciate him coming on. He actually has his own podcast. Let me make sure I get the name. It's Gottfried, right? Mark Gottfried. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me. I told him I got to give him his flowers. So let me read off his. You remember when in the Rocky IV when they were introducing Apollo Creed and they were saying all his titles and stuff. So he played 1 year at Oral Roberts and 3 years at Alabama. And he started as assistant coach at UCLA from 87 to 1995. 1995, I think, was a championship team with Tyus Edney and Charles O'Bannon and all those guys on there. Then his first coaching job was at Murray State. He went to Alabama, which is actually great because he actually got to coach for the school that he played 3 years for. So that's very interesting. NC State, and as recently, Cal State Northridge was the last time you started coaching, right? Mm-hmm. And you got a couple accolades. SEC Coach of the Year in 2002, the Ohio Valley Conference Coach of the Year in 1998, also 3 Ohio Valley Conference regular season champs and 2 Ohio Valley tournament champs. Mm-hmm. That's actually a pretty good resume.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so I appreciate you coming on. The interesting thing is why I wanted to, my show is usually different. It's about other stuff, but I like basketball. I love basketball. It's actually my first passion. I won't say it's my first love because I hate when people say that. Mm-hmm. So what actually, you've coached, you were just mentioning, I forgot that in between the coaching, you were actually with the scouting for the Dallas Mavericks. Mm-hmm. As a player, did you know when you were playing that you wanted to go into coaching, or did you also have a dream of going to the league?
I was one of those guys that when I played, I knew I wanted to coach. A lot of guys I played with, they struggled after, basketball stopped because they really didn't know what they wanted to do. And a lot of times there's a transition, especially if guys either, don't make it in the NBA or they play overseas a little bit, or they play in the NBA, then they stop. And, nowadays the money is so much greater. But back then, guys still needed to work and you needed to have a career after that. But for me, I always knew I wanted to coach. My dad was a coach. My uncle was a coach. I was around it when I was little. So it just kind of felt like a natural thing for me to do. So the transition was a lot easier for me, I think, than a lot of other people.
Okay, so before you got into coaching, you were playing. So what was the transfer protocol like then as opposed to now? So you transferred from and you went to Alabama. Did you have to sit out or how did it work?
Well, back then, every player in football and basketball. So the rule, a lot of people don't realize it, most of your other sports at the NCAA level in college, if you're golf, tennis, you play lacrosse or soccer, you can transfer without sitting out. But for the longest time, basketball and football always had the rule where you had to sit out one season, one academic year. So for me, that was 1983. And I had to sit out that 1 year, which I actually think looking back on it, most of the guys in my era would probably agree, it was really a good thing. You really got to work on your game. You got to develop, your body developed. You became a little bit more mature. You're a little bit older. And, I could remember as my career at Alabama, when I became a senior, I was actually 23 years old. So, we're playing against Rex Chapman, who played at Kentucky, played in the NBA a long time. And, he just turns 18. Well, I'm 23. That's a big difference, back then. Now the rule is for football and basketball, it just got changed with this whole portal thing where, kids can transfer without sitting out. And it's really, there's a lot of views on it, whether it's good or bad. But, it's changed the landscape because now so many players, they're just kind of moving around, move to move. I'm just moving to move. I don't like my situation as much, or I didn't get to play as much this year, so I'm going to put my name in a portal. And so it's really kind of created a lot of chaos, but I preferred it the way it used to be.
Okay.
But again, times change, the rules change. You got to adapt, you got to move on, and I think it's here to stay.
Quick question about that. I wonder, now when you transfer, does your scholarship transfer with you? But the school that you're going to, so if you have so Alabama would have to take, if you were a full ride at your other school, does Alabama take on?
Well, each school has, in basketball for the longest time, it's been the same. They have 13 scholarships to give out. So however they want to, when you walk away from the first school or transfer, like I did from Oral Roberts to Alabama, Alabama had to commit one of their 13 scholarships to me. So it wasn't like it followed me, but Alabama made the decision to say, okay, you're going to be one of our 13 scholarship players at that time, and that's the way it worked out.
Okay. Now you mentioned, because I was going to ask this, but you mentioned you kind of like the rules, how they were back then. And it's interesting because you were both a player and a coach, which I think is important for coaching. Somebody that's knows the rigors of the game, that's actually went through it. Give me your pros and cons for why, as a player, you would like to transfer, and why, as a coach, you don't like the transfer rules.
Right. Well, here's what I would say. That's a great question first, Terry. Transferring in itself is not bad at all. It works out a lot of times for people. Worked out for me. I transferred and played on 3 straight Sweet 16 teams. I got drafted by the Detroit Pistons 1987. So when I transferred, there was no negative in that regard. It was a good thing for me to do. So I'm not one of those guys that would say, hey, you should never transfer. I don't believe in that at all. Sometimes you are in a situation where, maybe it's not working out for you, or you don't like it, or you don't like the school, or the school may not have your major, or maybe you thought you were going to like the coaching staff and you don't. And there's all kind of different things that can come into play. But what I think what has happened is, with the transfer portal in our sport, in basketball and in football, I think those two are kind of, they go hand in hand. What we have now is, as soon as something doesn't go your way, you're automatically thinking about, I'm out, because I can. I don't have to sit out. And I think what we've lost a little bit is we've lost, trying to teach young people sometimes you can't always just run from a problem to somewhere else. Sometimes the answer is just to get better. Now, at the same time, sometimes, again, it's good for guys to transfer. But our numbers of transfers have dramatically, a few years ago, 10 years ago, there might have been 200 or 300 kids in the whole country in basketball that would transfer. I think this year we're close to 2,000 kids. And so I worry a little bit about the message that as soon as something doesn't go your way, you're automatically thinking. The other thing about it, if you think about it, you have schools kind of at the top of the food chain. So let's say in basketball, your North Carolinas and Dukes and Indiana, Kentucky, UCLA, all those schools are kind of at the top of the food chain. The people at the bottom of the food chain, like a Long Beach State or a UC Irvine or a Appalachian State in North Carolina, kids are now going to those schools. Maybe they're not being recruited at the highest level, but they're going to go to those schools, and they're almost treating it like a junior college. Man, if I can get in there and I can just get off for a year and I can get 15 points a game and whatever, I'm going from there. I'm transferring up to Kentucky, which again isn't bad, but they're viewing the mid-major or low-major schools as just a stopping point. They're not fully invested into it. So, there's always good and bad in everything. It's never all the way bad or all the way good. I guess probably having lived through both scenarios, I think in our sport, I like the fact that kids had to sit out. I think what's happening now too is you'll finish a game, we'll walk down and shake somebody else's, on the other team's hand and whisper in their area, hey, I got a scholarship for you next year if you want to transfer. Mm-hmm. And guys are recruiting players right off the team, to another school. So I'm not sure that's healthy as well.
That's interesting because you making those points kind of made me shift what I thought. I was always, thinking in the broad terms because I'm sure you heard this. Well, you should be able to leave your job for a better job. But if you think about it, a lot of times it might not be. If you have a responsibility, you can't just go to your job and say, I'm just going to quit a job and another one's going to be available. Right. You might quit your job and might not be able to find work for 6 months, and now you're in a difficult situation. So you would have to actually think, should I do this before making that decision? But I want you to explain, and I don't think what people understand is, even as a player, tell people the difficulties of coaching. I always tell people, it reminds me of a referee. Referees never have a home game. Somebody is always mad. As a coach, somebody's always mad because you have a player that feels like maybe he should get more time or something else, and then the pressures that you have to make sure you keep your job. Explain, how you've dealt with that and navigate that over your long coaching career.
Well, it's difficult, but here's the thing you always say, if you want to be liked, don't go into coaching. Just don't go into it. Now, the beauty of coaching is you get to build lifelong relationships with players and young guys that, and not every player you coach it's going to turn out that way. I ran into Toby Bailey the other night, who played at UCLA, had the 26-point game in the national championship game, 1995. He's just a beautiful, wonderful guy. Just a beautiful. And I got to know him. I'd have to go back in my mind, probably 1990, 93 or 4, maybe 92. And here we are still all these years later, we have a relationship. And Ed O'Bannon and Tyus Edney we talked about before we did the show. And so those are some of the great things about coaching. What's difficult now is because in the NBA, and it's a trickle down, everything trickles down from the top, because there's so much money that's available now that players are getting paid at the highest level. And you see guys that are out there getting a $250 million contract. Well, that's generational wealth. That's not $200,000. $250 million now, that changes generations to come in my family. And what's happened is because the money has become so great that there's so much pressure on everybody to get there, to get to that level. And parents feel it. Parents want it. Kids want it. And my last couple of years I was at Cal State Northridge. I had guys on my team that didn't even have a scholarship offer anywhere. They were barely Division I basketball players, yet in their mind, Coach, what do I got to do to get to the NBA? It's like, well, you understand the chances of you making it to the NBA are about zero, but you never want to say zero, but there's guys that are way better than you that are playing at UCLA and USC and Arizona and wherever else all around the country. So everybody has their kind of eye on the prize of that. And what happens a lot of times is parents get involved. They want to kind of halfway coach your team. It's hard to keep 13 guys happy, especially nowadays. It was hard in the 70s, 80s, 90s, but now it's really hard because the attention span and everybody has a quicker trigger to pull. If it's not working out for me, I'm out. I got to go somewhere else. And so it makes it hard. But I think like in any profession, you kind of navigate through the minutia of, okay, this isn't really much fun and that's not much fun. And, I don't like that. And you concentrate on all the great things and the positive things and, building that team unity and building relationships. Yeah. If you would have played for me and we bump into each other 30 years later or we're on the phone from now and then, you don't call, your guys that play for, I don't call them every month or whatever, but every 6 months or a year, they'll reach out to me, I'll reach out to them, and you're friends forever. Yes. And so that's really the beauty and the fun part. If you ask most guys coaching, that's what they take away more than anything. Winning is fun, but the relationships you get with people probably, I think, is probably the most paramount thing.
Yeah, I'm going to add something on when you mentioned about people think that and I think this is a misconception that goes around the world because you hear a lot of players that have never played, oh, this person is trash because they're sitting on the bench. And I'll share stories. My dad, told me, well, it's hard. You're not that good. Now people should be offended. But the truth is, you know, there's a different speed from high school to junior college. I played at Rancho Santiago, Coach Padgett. There's a different speed. Now I'm playing in open gym with Pooh Richardson. You know Pooh Richardson? That's my
coach.
I told people that I played with him for 6 months at Canoga Spectrum in Canoga Park. He didn't miss a shot for 6 months. But people consider him not that great, but he had some years in the league. And this is when I knew I wasn't able to play. Michael Cooper is running open gym at UCLA, and it's Lisa Leslie up there, Moani Mabika, so it's two girls. My buddy is like 6'5". Lisa Leslie's throwing elbows and everything. I'm like, bro, you got to play her hard. Like, this is an Olympic player. And there's this guy named Joaquin Hawkins, and he was beating me to my spot every single time. And I usually do a little move, and I would get there, and he was already there. And that's what let me know, like, this is a whole different speed than what people think. And I told my boys all the time, when I was coming up, I thought shooting 200 shots was good. I really needed to be shooting 2,000 shots, you know, to even try to go to that level. So back to the coaching. Are you done?
I never want to say I'm all the way done. College athletics with the NIL and the kids getting paid a lot of money nowadays in the transfer portal probably make it not as attractive. You know, I was with the Mavericks for a while, and I've kind of, you know, talked to some people about potentially going back in the NBA. And one thing about the NBA that's different is it's just basketball. You know, you're not trying to get guys to go to class. I don't have to have a study hall at night. I don't have to recruit anybody. You know, I was at an event the other day down in San Diego, and some guys that I know is a kind of a consortium with a bunch of NBA guys, and we're kind of sharing ideas. But, you know, when I coached before, you know, I have vacation, and I'm on this guy's boat in the Bahamas, and my assistant coach is calling me saying, hey, I got so-and-so's mom on the phone, and we got to get on the phone right now. So I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm on the phone talking to somebody's mother. Like, you just don't have a lot of time off. And now the good news is for college sports, guys are getting paid a lot of money now. You know, coaches used to get paid, you know, a few $100,000, which was still a lot. Now you're talking about guys getting 6, 7, 8 million a year. So it's a different game. But for me, I'm kind of enjoying what I'm doing, man. I'm a pickleball nut. I play pickleball every day. And like you mentioned before, I've got a podcast here I've cranked up. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And if the right opportunity were to come, you know, I'll take a look at it. But I also say to everybody, I had a great run. I was 35 years of pretty much, you know, there's 52 weeks in a year. I probably had 5 weekends off a year for 35 years. And so you get to a point later where you say, you know, this isn't so bad. You know, this is kind of, you get to a point where you've kind of earned, in my mind, a little bit of, you get a little time to kind of reevaluate and figure out what you want to do next. And that's kind of where I am right now.
So I know you have, I believe it's 4 boys?
4 boys and a daughter.
4 boys and a daughter. Looking back, is it hard on the kid? Now, when you went to, did you move the family, or do you look back on there, you think, I would do something different with that, or that's just the nature of coaching?
College athletics different than a lot of guys in the NBA. They'll have a home somewhere, and they'll just maybe go into that city and maybe rent an apartment for 9 months during the season. And college athletics is different. You have to be fully invested into that community, and the speaking engagements, the booster club meetings, and all the things you have to do year round. So, I had 2 children born at UCLA Medical Center when I coached at UCLA. I had 3 born in Murray, Kentucky. Okay. My kids were in Tuscaloosa, Alabama for 11 years, which was actually a long time for coaches to be in one spot. Then we end up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they're going to school there. So kids kind of, sons and daughters of coaches, they kind of get used to moving around. And sometimes people don't really understand how difficult that can be for children sometimes. I had, I moved my oldest son, who ended up playing football at Stanford. He was a really good athlete and a great, a good student. But he had been to the same school from 1st grade to 11th grade, and I moved him as a 12th grader. And he's a prospect. He's getting recruited. My daughter moved as an 11th grader, and so it happens. It's part of it. It draws your family closer together because you got to depend on each other. Probably my 5 kids, they're adults now, from 26 to 32 years old, but they're very close because probably kind of had to be, because they moved to a new town. They didn't know anybody, and it kind of drew them a little closer. So in everything we do, I always tell them, there's always a silver lining. There's always good things that are going to happen. Yes, there's going to be difficult times, but and then, when you're a son or daughter of a coach, you kind of get used to people either praising their father or chopping him up, and while we were winning at times, my kids would hear stuff at school, and then if you go through a losing streak, you're not winning as much. There's some ninth grader that's just, killing their dad. Like, your dad sucks, he's terrible. Mm-hmm. And so they get used to that. They get used to kind of navigating kind of the haters a little bit. We call them now. That's a great term I like. Everybody's got them. And you go into coaching, and there's a lot of people that, they sit up in the 19th row and they really don't know if the ball is pumped or stuffed. They really don't know, but they think they know, and they got a lot of opinions. So even my kids, they started to kind of discern a little bit, like, we're not listening to that guy. He just, they don't know. They don't really know, and they don't understand. And I think most coaches and their families, you just kind of get used to that.
So speaking of people that have a lot of opinions, let's talk about the parents. Mm-hmm. And I think it's starting at AAU. I've never been a fan of AAU. Mm-hmm. My oldest is 26. Mm-hmm. He actually, I tell people you should go where you fit. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is opportunity, mm-hmm. and if you have somebody that's going to give you an opportunity, you should go where you fit instead of trying to maybe chase a name. Right. Unfortunately, he was in love with a girl. He followed her to Dublin. It didn't work out. And he came back. He had the coach at Glendale liked him, but he ended up going to where I went, Rancho, and he ended up tearing his ACL, and he hasn't played since. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you feel about AAU, but I was telling you earlier about coaching at the YMCA. And the parents are nuts. Mm-hmm. They think that that their kids are better than what they are. Mm-hmm. They want these they want to yell and scream at the coach, and it's like, I can't do in one practice, which is all they get a night, what you should be doing 5 or 6 or 7 days a week if you want your child to be able to dribble the ball. Mm-hmm. As it was 7 or 8 years old, it's like bumper cars. They run into each other. What was your experience? Mm-hmm. Did you have a difficulty in your coaching with a parent that was like, well, my son should be playing? Oh. And then how did you deal with that?
Most of the answer is yes, and most of the time, coaches that have a lot of stature, you talk about guys that are in the Hall of Fame. They're still dealing with it too, although because they have so much stature, you can quiet that family down a little bit more. When you're a young coach, I got the job at Alabama. I'm the head coach at Alabama. I'm 30 years old. Mm. And anyway, it's part of the turf. AAU basketball, traveling team basketball, there's a lot of good, there's some bad. The bad, I think, is that kids, they get used to changing teams every time something doesn't go their way. Then they go back to their high school team, and they just change again. Okay, I'm a freshman. I'm going to go somewhere as a sophomore. I'm going to change as a junior. You see these kids, and sometimes you look back, you say, well, how many schools this guy's been to? Mm-hmm. And part of that, I think, stems from the fact that when they're playing traveling team ball, that if my son's not getting enough touches, he's not getting the ball, he's not getting enough shots, or that other kid's featured more than my kid, well, I got to get my kid off this team and put him on a different team. So that's part of it. The good is a lot of times kids get to play against great competition because a lot of the better players, especially at the highest level, you're bringing the best players together. And now I'm a young 15, 16-year-old. I look across and say, that dude's a whole lot better than me, and I got to get my game right. So there's it encourages kids to, I think, work harder and become better. Mm-hmm. So there's always good and bad, but even at the college level, I can remember I'm coaching at NC State. I've got this kid playing for me. He's a great shooter. I've known him since he's probably in the 8th grade, 9th grade. His parents are wonderful. They're just wonderful people. And, we start the year off. He's a good shooter, but he just can't make one. He's he's not playing very well. And we're about 6 or 7 games into the year, and I had put him in the starting lineup. I took him out of the starting lineup. He was probably 5 for 45 from the three. I mean, he couldn't make one to save his life. Yeah, and his mom calls me on the phone, known her forever, wonderful person. And she said, Coach, I just don't understand. My son, I thought he was just going to be a start in the starting 5. And I said, well, here's what you should tell your son. Play better and you'll play more. And she said, I know, Coach, but, and then she kind of, when I said, whoa, you didn't hear what I just told you. Let me say that one more time. I'm going to say it real slow. If he plays better, he'll play more. I mean, I can't make it a whole lot simpler than that. Exactly. If he's 5 for 45, at some point I got to look at somebody else. But in her mind, or in a lot of parents' minds, you know, when they watch the game, they're watching the game. They're really just watching their son or their daughter play. And that's part of it. We all go through it. And, you know, you just have to realize that. I used to tell people all the time, people would ask me about my own children. I had one son play college football at Stanford. I had another son play, he was with me at NC State and played some at Northridge and was a really good player. And people would say, well, what level do you think your son is? I say, I don't know. I don't know. The hardest thing to do is evaluate your own child. Mm-hmm. You can't do it. It's hard. You're seeing everything through rose-colored glasses, and you're not really seeing, you know, what he's not doing well, or maybe a little, but, you know, and you're also rooting for him. You know, you're rooting for your son to play well and to play, you know, even when my son played football at Stanford, and I'm a coach. I've been coaching my whole life. Sometimes I'm wondering out there, why ain't they throwing the ball to him? You know, they threw it to the other guy. You know, you know, and it maybe that's the scheme. Maybe they think the other guy's better. I don't know, but that's their business as coaches, and I never wanted to get involved with it. But I do know for parents, it can be tough at times, you know, and for coaches to deal with that. But they deal with it a little bit in the NBA, but not very much. Not very much at all. You know, I paid you a salary. Now you're an adult. And this is a business, all business here. And so, you know, I've heard guys, head coaches I know in the NBA tell me a story here and there, but not nearly as much as college coaches deal with it.
I mentioned before, one of the things when I had sent you the DM and the Instagram about, I had a bad experience with coaching, and I let the experience maybe mess me up because I used to like read the books on basketball. I pretty much figured I could if there was already shooters, I would just rebound, you know, to do the thing. But what I didn't like is at the time, especially at the high school level, and I grew up in Long Beach, so you know we had the Ed Ratliffs and the, you know what I mean, you know, all the Ricky Price. He was at Santa Ana.
He's a bad boy, by the way, Ed Ratliff.
Yeah,
people forget how good he is.
Yeah,
by the way.
and so they would do a lot of stuff like the players would come late to practice, and the coach would still let them play. And when I went to junior college, it happened a couple of times, and it irritated me. Because, you know, at this point, you're a young man, you're paying. I'm like, I don't want to be busting my butt in practice, and the coaches are allowing this stuff to go on. Right. Now, I don't know how it is at the D1 level because if you guys sign the contract, so if you sign the contract, are you pressured to, because you're playing who you think gives you the best chance to win so you can keep your job? Is that how it goes? Because I just felt like I had Coach Mickelson. That was my coach at Long Beach Millikan High School. And, man, for years, man, I was mad. For you, when I got older, I was mad at him. I didn't, because as a man, I'm like, how could you do that? You know, you're rewarding bad behavior.
Right.
And so how do you, I mean, you haven't coached, you obviously it's different at D1. Is it the pressure because you want to keep your job and you're worried about taking care of your family, or is it just you are, that doesn't matter? Like, you see a person that's coming and putting in on the work, and obviously we know star players get different treatment. It is how the world is. They treat celebrity, you know, they shut down the store, Kim Kardashian. I said, man, I'm already here. You shutting down the store telling me to leave because she coming in here? I mean, what? My money ain't good? But that's just how the world works. Right. So is that the truth?
Well, it's a great question. Here's what you have to remember. Coaches, first of all, they want to win. They want to win. I never viewed it one day of my life like, okay, I have to do this to keep my job. Okay. I want to win, period. If I win enough, I'm going to keep my job. It's just those two go hand in hand. If I win enough, it's all going to work itself out. So from the coach's standpoint, you're trying always to do what you think is best for the team. Now, here's where it gets tricky. And you made a great point about the story when you played. There are a lot of different ways to do this. You know, like now one thing that does happen is if when a coach loses the respect of the players, it's hard to get it back. It's hard to get it back. You know, it's like the train goes off the tracks, and it goes off the tracks easy, but to get it back on the tracks is really hard. It's really hard. And so that's probably at times the demise of some coaches, you know, where they've allowed so much, you know, leeway to certain players that they kind of lose the whole group, you know, and then that may have happened. I don't know. But coaches want to win. Not that players don't want to win, but players, you know, there's 13 or 15 of them, and there's one head coach. And I remember when I was an assistant coach at UCLA, and Jim Herrick was our head coach, and we were playing at Cal, and I was young. I might have been 24 years old, and we were going to a shoot-around to play that evening, and I sit beside him on the bus. We're zipping over there at 11 o'clock, do a little walkthrough at the gym. And I'm trying to learn everything, and I said, Coach, what's the biggest difference between being an assistant coach and a head coach? And how about this answer? He said, lonely. That was the word he used, lonely. Like when you're the head coach, there's only one of you. Mm-hmm. The assistant coaches, there's 3 or 4 of them, and every now and then they can get in a hotel room and they can say, I can't believe we did that. We can't. Why do we switch this? Or we should be playing that guy instead of him. But when you're the head coach, you're the CEO. You're the guy that sits at the top, and you have to make decisions that are sometimes not very popular. Sometimes they're hard. Sometimes you make them wrong. You make a lot of wrong decisions. You think, I need to play this guy instead of that guy, or we need to do this or that, or, we're getting ready to play this team, and I really want to look at, running this or looking at our zone or whatever it may be, the decisions you make. And sometimes you make the wrong ones. Mm-hmm. And that's okay because, when you sit in that seat, it's kind of a lonely seat. Mm-hmm. But I think coaches, the most part, now we got some wackos out there like in every profession, but the most part, guys, they're trying to win. Mm-hmm. Now, they may go about it a completely different way than somebody else would. Mm-hmm. That's okay. That's their prerogative. They're the head coach. They can coach any way they want to. They can do it however they want. And whether it's they survive a long time or a short time, time will tell. Mm-hmm. But coaches want to win, I think, and they're not really doing things to say, okay, I got to do this to keep my job. I just want to win, man. I want to win. I want to take Alabama farther than they've ever been in the tournament. I want to, I'm aspiring and I'm ambitious. I want to conquer this. I want to stand at the top. I want to get to a Final Four. Really, that's kind of what's driving every day. The decisions you make, which sometimes they're not very popular decisions. Yeah. Sometimes they're hard to make. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it may be a great player that has a lot of potential that you have to sit down because maybe he's not coming on time or he's not practicing hard or whatever it may be. So there's a million decisions that coaches have to make. And they're not going to always be right. A lot of times they're going to be wrong.
A couple more things on coaching, then we'll get into the state of today's game. Mm-hmm. Your most memorable win and the loss that has stuck with you for your whole entire life, whether it's as a player or as a coach.
Well, I've been very lucky. Let me just say this: I've had some great wins. Obviously, we won the national championship, and when I was at UCLA as an assistant coach. When I was at Alabama, we went to the Elite Eight, which they've never been back, only one time in the school history, and we had to beat Syracuse in the Sweet 16 to get there. And prior to that game, in the second round game, Stanford was 30-1. They had Josh Childress. They were really, really good. Mm-hmm. Our team was a team. I think we got in the tournament. Our record was like 18-12. We kind of got in there in the end. We played good at the end, but we upset Stanford, who was the number 1 team in the country, who was also the number 1 seed of the number ones. They were the top seed. Yeah. That one was really special. I remember at NC State, my first year at NC State, we beat Villanova, who was a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And then the 2 years after that, Villanova went back-to-back national championships. We knocked them out the year before. So there's been a lot of great ones. I still go back, and it's interesting. Yes, that's a great question, by the way, Terry, because my college roommate, his name was Jim Farmer, played in the NBA 4 or 5 years, and we had a really nice team at Alabama. Derek McKee played 15 years in the league, and we had a good team. But we were a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. We were my last year of college, and we believed we were going to the Final Four. We were good enough to do it. It was the very first year of the college basketball having a 3-point line. Okay. We get to the Sweet 16. Rick Pitino is coaching Providence. Mm-hmm. Billy Donovan, who's now the head coach of the Chicago Bulls and was at Florida for years, is his best player. Mm-hmm. And they utilized the 3-point line. It was the first year for it. A lot of coaches really weren't sure how to incorporate it into their system. And Rick Pitino did. And, boy, they drove it hard and pitched it, and they were jacking up threes and making them. And, they're getting 3, you're getting 2. They're getting 3, you're getting 2, throughout a game. But we got upset in Louisville in that Sweet 16 game, and I was 23 years old. And it still hurts, man. It still hurts. And Billy and I have talked about it throughout the year. I'm like, dude, man, I still haven't gotten over that one. Yeah. And my roommate Jim Farmer and I, we we talk about it all the time because we felt as players, your window as a player, as a college player, is not a 20-year. You only got a couple years in college, and we had a chance, and we didn't get it done. So that was pretty painful.
Yeah. So I know so you say you were scouting for the Mavericks. Luka's is a remarkable player.
Mm-hmm.
When you look, obviously it's different from Division I, the NBA, the players. When you look at the game, is frustrating to me now because there's a lot of load management for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Then the pundits kind of there's this whole debate. Everything is Jordan or LeBron. Obviously in '83, Jordan was at North Carolina, so he's probably around your time. I was born in '75. I actually grew up on Magic Johnson. To me, I thought before LeBron, I thought Magic was one of the greatest players I've ever seen.
You're right.
Simply from you win it in college, you come your first year in NBA, you win it. It's just, to me, there's really no comparison to that. And people will say now, well, he wasn't a great shooter. Well, in that era, there wasn't really that wasn't really the focus. But to be able to involve, as you know, the team. So I try to tell some of the little kids, look, everybody is 5 players on the court. Other people have to know their role. You have to play. Everybody can't be John Lennon. You know what I'm saying? Some other people got to contribute. Do you think that? I mean, how do you feel about the NBA now? Do you enjoy it, or is it just like? Oh, you love it? Okay.
I love it. Now you brought up so many great things we can talk about. I find it interesting now too. People love to go Jordan, LeBron, and I always say time out. First of all, Magic, number one. If you ask most people that are a little bit older as well, and you said if you had to start a basketball team tomorrow, who's the first player you're going to have start that team? Most people would say Magic Johnson, because what he did for everybody. And he was 6'9" and passed, and he could play center. I mean, he did it all. I mean, the guy was just, and I've gotten to know him a little bit, and I just love him. He's a phenomenal human being and personality, and he walks in, he just lights the room up. He's amazing. But then I tell people, I'm not going down that road. I'll go LeBron or Kobe. I mean, I'll go Michael Jordan or Kobe.
Okay.
LeBron to me is Kobe Bryant had the same kind of killer approach that Jordan had. I think it was. I'm not here to be your buddy. We're not buddying around. We're not going to dinner after the game. I'm here to kick your ass. Period. That's my job. Kobe to me was a different breed in that regard, like Jordan.
Yes.
Jordan was that way.
Yes.
So those two guys are, to me, they're up there with Mount Rushmores of basketball more than anybody. But I like the pro game. What I don't like about the pro game is if you go back, and younger people won't relate to this at all, but if you go back and you think of Phil Jackson and Jerry Sloan at the Utah Jazz and Larry Brown and some of these guys that coached Boston and way back, everybody had a different system, and they ran different things. And it was if you played Utah or you played at Seattle or you went to play wherever you played, it was different. Now everybody's pretty similar. They kind of run slot ball screens, and they pick and roll and dive. And so each team, it's kind of evolved where the game is. And that's what I don't like. I think we lost some of that uniqueness of each coach, the legendary coaches. Like Phil Jackson coming in, with his whole system and the way he ran, the triple post and all the things he did. Nobody could match it. Nobody knew how to teach it. People tried. They really didn't know all the ins and outs and what they were trying to do. And I go back, Jerry Sloan was probably one of the great ones. Don Nelson Sr. was phenomenal all those years. Lenny Wilkins. But everybody was different, and I liked that back then. So I don't like sometimes when I watch games, it's, you could just put a different jersey on tomorrow and we always do the same thing on every team.
Yes.
The players have gotten better, a lot better. That's one thing that people, probably don't appreciate as much. You take the KDs and, at their size, at their, height-wise and their bodies. And, now the other thing that's happened in the NBA is the center it's like dinosaurs. They're gone. They're not around anymore. I was at a party a few years back, and it was Shaq, David Robinson, Ralph Sampson. There was a fourth one. They were standing there, and I was sitting there talking to these guys, and I asked them, I said, where'd you guys go? Like all of a sudden, there's nobody like you anymore. There's no centers. There's no dominant low post guys. Big kids don't want to be centers anymore. It's like a bad word to be a center.
Yes.
And so that kind of bothers me, because if you go back and look at some of these big guys, the way they played around the basket, Shaq dominated. Kareem, he's another one, by the way, that he's left out of the greatest of all time conversation.
Ridiculous.
And I kind of always go, time out now, guys. There was this guy that played at UCLA. Let's not forget, he was a back-to-back-to-back National Player of the Year, 3 straight national champions, I think 6 world championships in the NBA, led the NBA in scoring. I think he was an 18-time All-Star. I mean, and sometimes we don't want to, and shot a hook shot that nobody has been able to replicate. Now think about that in any sport. Take a golfer, a quarterback, or baseball player, a hitter. He was the leading scorer in the history of the NBA until this past year when LeBron passed him. And his patent shot was a sky hook that nobody else could replicate.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't happen in any sport.
Yeah.
So for me, he's left off that discussion. He
and
should
they
be in
changed the
there.
rules. And they changed the rules to try to stop him.
God, you couldn't
So,
dunk.
Yeah.
Took the dunk out of the game for a while. So it's different. You know, times evolve and change. But I think Kareem is in that group.
Yeah. For the record, I'm a LeBron guy. Like I say, Magic has always been. I grew up on Magic. I had his Converse. I'm a LeBron guy. I'm a LeBron guy right now. But I like different players. I like people that get in team involved. I'm with you. I don't like the game because everything's screen and roll. Just pick out the try to go for the mismatch and attack. There's really no system. Which I think if they ran the system, you can work. So let's move on to the topic I wanted to talk about: Reggie Bush and the Heisman. Now you had listen. I'm probably on the opposite spectrum with everybody here, and I don't want to get into the political elements and stuff because that's just a whole nother thing with people like but the reason I feel he shouldn't get his Heisman back because you run into those were the rules at the time. Those were the rules. Unfortunately, a lot of times we want to go back and change things, and it'd be it would be great if we could make a lot of things right. If anybody should probably get something, it probably should be Ed O'Bannon because he was the one that they used the likeness for the video games, if anything, at first. But I think with Bush, you broke the rules, first of all. That's been my biggest issue with rewarding people for bad behavior because that shouldn't happen. And I think that sends and I even hate using that sends a bad message because a lot of times people don't care about the message, man. If we just being honest, a lot of people just don't care. They just care about the product. I know you think differently, but if I would, he shouldn't get it. It was stripped for a reason. Sorry. In people's minds that followed the sport that year, we know you were the Heisman Trophy winner, but in how the rules were set, I don't think he should get it back.
Well, I disagree. Now, and here's why I disagree, and it's a great topic. First of all, I think, rules get broken. I've been involved in it, and I've been on the other end of that, so I get it. And there should be penalties, and penalties were levied against USC, the football program, that were pretty harsh, for what was going on. And if you look at some of the other major programs, Alabama, Ohio State, there's a bunch of them out there. First of all, cheating is part of the game. I don't care what anybody says, and it happens, okay? And USC football really got hammered hard. What he did on the field, in my opinion, stands alone by itself. Now, I may be on an island by myself on that, which I think what he earned that as an individual player. The team got penalized. It hurt his reputation. Probably hurt maybe future earnings in a way. And so I still think the Heisman Trophy is something he earned by how he played. I think them taking that away from him, in my view, was vindictive. It's a position of I'm not going to let you have any joy from this. Now we're going to hurt your team and the school, and we're also going to do this. And I personally believe the NCAA does that a lot. I do. That's my opinion. I might be wrong. It's the same reason, different but the same. And I've had this discussion with a lot of people in baseball. I believe Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. I do. He's the best hitter of all time, period. End of story. Did he bet on baseball later? We can debate, and he's been in and out and, all the things. And But his accomplishments as an individual player, I think Reggie Bush, they're different, but similar in that I just believe that he should have that. He should be recognized as the Heisman Trophy winner of that year, period. End of story.
Okay. I like the point that you made about being vindictive because that does change my view a little. If somebody's doing it, like you say, with Pete Rose, it's clearly an agenda because there's been worse people that's in the hall than betting on the game, you know. And like you say with Reggie Bush, he did earn it because he was a monster that year.
Yeah, period.
And so that's it. But look, man.
But we can agree. We can agree to disagree.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's the beauty of sports, right? Everybody, you know what I'm saying. Everybody's not gonna always see eye to eye on the same thing. But look, Mark, I appreciate you coming and taking your time to do the show. It's been great talking to you. I love basketball. I hope you get back into scouting or whatever you're going to enjoy. I think scouting will probably be better. You're supposed to be aging like fine wine. You get back into coaching. You see, you still got all your hair. You get back coach. These crazy kids is transferring every week. Your hair might start falling out. But thanks a lot for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate you taking your time. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that's it. Wrapping it up. Episode 6 of Never About the Cake podcast. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram. Follow Cole on Twitter. Follow Cole on Instagram. Just don't follow us home.